What's up, Pen in the Shank community? Do I ever have a topic, a conversation that fits perfectly with the crime and prisons genre? Then the topic that I'm going to talk about right here, and that's pardons. Recently in the news, they had a rapper, a local rapper from Louisiana, a very popular rapper if you're from Louisiana. And I think if you're not from Louisiana or from the South, you probably heard of him anyway, because he's all over the internet. And his name is Lil Boosie Badazz, aka Torrance Hatch. That's his legal name. His rap name is Lil Boosie Badazz or Boosie Badazz, depending on, I don't know, whatever reiteration or iteration he has, because, Lil Boosie, I guess, don't sound quite the same as Boosie Badazz, or maybe Boosie Badazz was the juvenile version of Lil Boosie, who was Lil Boosie when he first came out to rap. And I don't know if at any point he ever used his legal name, Torrance Hatch, to claim himself as a rapper, because he still presents himself as Boosie Badazz or Lil Boosie. It's interchangeable. I don't know. Share in the comments if you never heard of Lil Boosie. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I'm interested if you did not hear if you never heard of Lil Boosie prior to clicking on this video. So anyway, he's from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he's also been to prison. He's been to prison in Louisiana. He's been to Angola. I think it was on some drug charge. He was hooked up on some capital offenses, some unaliving charges too that he was connected to. I don't think he was ever convicted of. And he got convicted of some things in Louisiana. He did some state time in the state of Louisiana. Like I said, he went to Angola prison and he did some time there. But also, he got out of prison from Louisiana and was doing a rap video, from what I understand, in California. And in the rap video, he had a heater on him. He had a blaster. He had a strap. Boom, boom, boom. You know what I'm talking about. He had that on him. And in the rap video, the feds saw that he had the blaster, and they convicted him for having possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. And he pled guilty to the charges. He didn't go to prison, but he got a felony conviction for possession of a firearm as a felon. Now, fast forward to today. Lil Boosie is trying to get a pardon from his federal firearms conviction charges as a felon. I'm assuming his goal is to first get a pardon from the firearms charges in the feds, and then once he gets a pardon from that, then to try to petition the Louisiana governor, Jeff Landry, or whoever may come in office next, to give him a pardon in Louisiana so he can have a full clean slate. And listen, I do not blame Lil Boosie for trying to get a pardon, because as a convicted felon, I have tried numerous times and on numerous occasions to get a pardon for myself, and I was unsuccessful because I don't have 600,000 stacks like Lil Boosie. And that's where we find ourselves at in today's story. Lil Boosie is looking to retrieve some of the 600,000 stacks that he dropped on a DC lobbyist firm to petition President Trump for a federal pardon on his firearms as a felon charge. And from what I'm gathering, the company that he hired to petition President Trump said that they specifically had Trump on speed dial. That's and I'm paraphrasing Lil Boosie's words. He said, yeah, these dudes hit me up like they had Trump on speed dial. And Boosie was like, yeah, good. Look, I'm going to pay to, get this pardon, because I want this pardon. And Boosie has the money. And so to him, to get a pardon on that charge is worth 600 grand. If I had 600 grand to spend and I knew I can get a pardon, and I thought that the people who was going to petition the governor of Louisiana for the pardon, I'd pay the 600 stacks for that pardon. That's how much getting a pardon would mean to me as a convicted felon. Like I said, I looked into it. And I talked to some attorneys, but because I have a violent offense, it's going to be hard for me to get a pardon. I still believe that if I can get to the ears of the Louisiana governor, I don't care if it's a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, if they heard my story and they sat down and talked to me, I think there's a good chance I would walk out of there with a signed pardon. So if y'all have any connections and y'all want to send this video out, listen, I'm just a small YouTuber, but I'm somebody who done a big difference in my community. I've done a lot of things to help a lot of people, a lot of stuff that's not even on record. And I made a difference. And I've been home from prison now for 21 years. And I have a clean record. I'm just like y'all. I'm a civilian now. I'm just an ex-con. I'm a civilian. And so Lil Boosie's trying to be a full-fledged civilian by getting that record expunged or record pardoned. And so his first step is to get that get that pardon from the president, because it's a federal charge, and the president of the United States can't give a pardon on federal charges. Governors have to give pardons on state charges. So Boosie has a Fed charge and a state charge. But if he's going to work on this thing, I'm assuming he feels his best shot is to start with, if he can get Trump to give him a pardon, chances are he can get Jeff Landry to give him a pardon too. And you can say what you want about Trump. Trump don't have nothing to do with these lobbyist firms. I am not a proponent of lobbyist firms. I don't care if they're Democratic lobbyist firms or Republican lobbyist firms. But all of a sudden, because Lil Boosie paid a so-called conservative lobbyist firm, people are up in arms about it. If you was convicted of a felon, and if you had an opportunity to get your pardon, you don't care if it was coming from a liberal firm or a conservative firm. You would pay that money quick and in a hurry if you had that type of money. Well, Lil Boosie had the money, but apparently he feels played about it because the firm did not even talk to President Trump. And so Lil Boosie is obviously not at the point to where President Trump has even seen his paperwork for a pardon. I'm not even sure if President Trump even knows who Lil Boosie is at this moment. But we know that President Trump has a history of pardoning rappers. He pardoned Lil Wayne. He pardoned Kodak Black. And there's a few other ones I'm not thinking of. So the chances of Lil Boosie getting a pardon is high if he can get the pardon in front of the president. As you know, the president of the United States is a very busy man. And he doesn't have time to look at every single piece of paperwork that comes across his desk. So what happens with these lobbyist firms go into the White House and they use their connections to try to get their pardons or their petitions in front of the president or whoever else in Congress or the Senate they need to get this stuff in front of to get something done or to get some attention put on whatever it is they're trying to focus on. Well, apparently this firm, and I forgot the name of the firm, and they say this is a far right firm. You ever notice something? They always say far right for something, but they barely ever say far left when it's mainstream media. Of course, YouTubers will say it, and non-mainstream media outlets will say far left, but you'll never hear the mainstream media say it. Anyway, Lil Boosie is trying to get this pardon and it doesn't work. And I'm assuming at this point he feels like it's not going to happen. So part of the clause of the contract, supposedly, now from what I hear and what I read, this contract is pure garbage. Lil Boosie said from the time that he talked to the firm and told them he was interested in hiring them to help him get this pardon through President Trump, within less than an hours, he had in his hand a contract. That's how quick they wrote it up. And supposedly this contract is written up like trash. And in somewhere in the clause in the contract, it says if they could not get the pardon, $300,000 out of the $600,000 that Boosie dropped on this pardon would be redeemable and refundable. So now Boosie is trying to get this back, and the law firm is fighting back, saying that there's some kind of thing in the contract that they're saying that they don't have to pay the $300,000 back. And now this is making the news everywhere. And hear me out on this, y'all. This isn't a political thing. This is just somebody who's an ex-con who happens to be a rapper, who happens to have money. Now it's getting on a spotlight, but you don't know what it's like unless you're a convicted felon to know what it's like to be a convicted felon. And if you have an opportunity, you don't care who's going to give you the pardon. You're willing to do what you can, especially if it just costs some money and you have the money to pay for it. You're willing to pay for that pardon. That's how it is, man. So I don't know where Lil Boosie stands politically. I've heard some of his conversations where he's, when it comes to social issues, he tends to be a little bit conservative, and offensive to some people when it comes to LGBTQ plus community topics. And then on other topics, he tends to be liberal. So I guess there's a mixed bag. I don't know where the dude stands. I don't know who the dude votes for. It really ain't none of my business. He can vote for whoever he wants to vote for. This is more about trying to get a pardon no matter who's in office and no matter what they believe. If you can work with somebody to get your pardon, you're willing to work with them. And that's why I think you should treat people all with respect, no matter what your beliefs are. And so now Lil Boosie's in this situation. I'm telling you, y'all, I remember when I was in prison, they had this supposedly firm going around saying that they could help prisoners get into halfway houses because they had connections in Louisiana. And if you paid them a certain fee, they would get your paperwork put in front of the proper people to get you moved into a halfway house. Like a fool, I was desperate. So I paid like $2,000 to get this firm who really wasn't a firm. It was supposedly connections on top of connections, right? All politics. I paid him $2,000. I had my mom and my dad go meet with somebody, sign this Mickey Mouse contract, and they were supposed to get me into a halfway house. Needless to say, it never came. So you can look at Lil Boosie and say he got desperate and dropped 600,000 stacks. But for me, $200,000 was a lot of money. And I was willing to put it up just to try to get into a halfway house so I can do my time a little easier and have a little more freedom and a little more rights. But it didn't happen. It was all a scam. And so you can say maybe Lil Boosie got scammed out of this money, but to him, he was desperate and it was worth it. And as a convicted felon, I'm saying I don't blame Lil Boosie for doing this. I completely understand why he did it, and I probably would have done it if I had the money to. I would still drop money if I knew that I can get my petition on the governor's desk with an opportunity to get a pardon, or if I can get an audience, if I can sit down with the governor and explain my situation to him and show him the man that I became and have an opportunity at a pardon, that would be very important to me. And I would be willing to exhaust my resources to try to get a state pardon in Louisiana. So I completely understand why Lil Boosie would try to do it in the feds. And I'm assuming that if he did it in the feds, he's going to try to do it in the state so he can have a clean record. I don't blame him. Good for him. But we'll see how this plays out. It's making all over the news because some people don't like the firm that he hired, but they're talking outside their head because they don't understand what it's like to be a felon. Give me a like and subscribe to The Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. Let's go.